Hey everybody, what's going on? Frozen here with Outdoor Adventures. For those that don't know me, or maybe you're new to the channel, first of all, welcome and thanks for watching. I thru hiked the PCT this year in 2024, and I'm finally getting around to talking about my important gear, my big three. So shelter, backpack, sleep system, and a few odds and ends that I also wanted to include in this video, like how I carried my food, bear canister, bear bag, etc., etc. So I think the best way to do this is just to start with the tent. One of my most favorite pieces of gear on the PCT was my tent. I set up in a variety of places, including the desert, which is just literally sand, and in the Sierra, I had to set up on a lot of granite slabs that you couldn't get tent stakes in. Never had a problem setting up. I was sleeping early on in the desert section in a 60-mile-an-hour wind and rainstorm, which was pretty intense. I had to use 2 trekking poles because I feared that the tent was going to collapse, but it handled it like a champ. No issues at all with the tent except for 2 minor things. First thing is, I think a rodent tried to chew a little piece of my tent floor. It just got a little nibble and realized it was too much effort to get through. Little piece of DCF tape, fixed it right up. And then halfway through the PCT, I lost a zipper. Not lost, but the zipper wouldn't close. The teeth wouldn't catch onto the zipper. And I had to figure out how to fix it. So my wife, I remember one night my wife was texting me on my Garmin inReach Messenger, and she was telling me how to fix it, and I was able to fix it in the field with, shouldn't do it, but just my teeth. And when I got into town, I got a pair of pliers and was able to fix it further. That's really the only thing that went wrong with my tent. Everything else was perfect. The space inside the tent was great. It is labeled as a 1-person tent, but really you could get a small dog in here if you really wanted to, probably like beagle sized. But I used that extra space for keeping organized. I had a lot of electronics, which is what we're going to talk about in the next video. And just having that extra little bump out on my tent was phenomenal. I went with my trusty full-sized MSR groundhogs. These have made it all the way through the Appalachian Trail and now the Pacific Crest Trail. No problems at all. I will be replacing these at this point just because, well, they're getting a little dull. They're not really spiky anymore to shove into the ground, but they worked great. And again, absolutely no complaints. Let's move on to my sleeping pad, another one of my favorite pieces of gear on the trail. This is the Nemo Tensor, but it's a wide pad. And I got a wide pad because the way I sleep is just crazy. I just toss and turn most nights, and sometimes on a regular size pad, I just find myself sleeping on the tent floor with no insulation. This was great. Now in the desert section, I formed a very, very small hole on the underside, which I was able to patch when I got into Big Bear Lake, I believe it was. And after that, I didn't have any problems at all. Now, what I would recommend is, while we're talking about the tent and the pad, I think especially in the desert section, maybe the Sierra section, because there are a lot of sharp rocks on the ground, I would use a piece of Tyvek as a ground floor, or a ground sheet, I should say. Now, I started with just some Polycro, I think it is. I think it was from Gossamer Gear, or who knows, one of those gear vendors. You can cut it to size yourself, but it didn't really hold up. It got snagged on any kind of rock, any kind of thorns, especially in the desert. And, I just found myself just not liking it. So in Kennedy Meadows South, right before the Sierra, I picked up a sheet of Tyvek, and that same piece of Tyvek lasted me the whole way, and it was pretty great. The Nemo Tensor is just thick enough where I was able to deflate a little bit of the pad. It'll take some of the air out and just have a nice soft base for bedding where I didn't feel any rocks or any abnormalities underneath me, but I still got consistently a pretty good night's sleep, which is more than I can say than when I'm home, where I just, again, toss and turn all night. I'm an insomniac. I don't really sleep very well, but on this pad and expending the energy on a thru hike, I was able to sleep pretty well. For a pillow, some people just kind of sleep on their clothes. I need a little bit more neck support just because I have neck and back issues from working at a desk all day. And this is the Sea to Summit Aeros ultralight, but it is the large version. So this pillow is gigantic. The large version is actually a little thicker. I think it's 4 inches, but I like a softer pillow. So because I have that extra thickness, I'm able to deflate it more again to make it softer. Now, I would say this pillow held up great. I did have to replace it, I think 1,700 miles in, where I did develop a slow leak. Not even on the underside. In one of these little baffles, there was a leak that I couldn't tape, obviously, so I just had to get another one. I like the pillow enough to get another one, so that's important to note. But the Sea to Summit Aeros Ultralight. Same pillow that I used on the AT, but the large version. Let's talk about this while it's just up here. Not really a part of my sleep system, but you know, sometimes you fold this up, you put it underneath your pad on, you know, ground that you're kind of leaning on, or, you know, if it's sloped a little bit, and this worked out great with some extra clothes. This is a Thermarest Z seat. I did end up, I had one to start and then I lost it early on, I think in my first or second town. So I picked up another one and lasted the whole trip. It's pretty squished now. As you can see, this rode on the top of my backpack and I used it anytime I needed a seat. Talk about warmth and insulation. I started with a Hammock Gear regular sized burrow. This is a 20-degree burrow. I got it in blue, and on the back side it's black. I get all my kind of quilts like that. Again, I've used Hammock Gear. Actually, both of these quilts have been used on the Appalachian Trail. They are still going very, very strong after the Pacific Crest Trail through hike. I swapped to my 40-degree quilt from a 20 to a 40 after we got into a 110-degree heat wave. I forget where exactly that was. You have to go back and watch the videos. But I kept that for several weeks until we pretty much all through Oregon, most of Northern California, and then in Washington, I switched back to my my 4-season quilt, my 20-degree quilt, and I thought that was a perfect amount of warmth. Now, the only time it got even close to the temperature rating of my 20 was before Forester Pass in the Sierra, and I was very, very glad to have my 20-degree quilt. But here's the thing. I talked in my last video with my clothing that I brought, and I had a set of base layer pants that I had with me most of the trip, but I never ended up using because my quilt was so warm. So here's my suggestion. If you're starting mid to possibly early April, like not April 1st, but like closer to the mid-range April, I would go with a 30-degree quilt, and that should be fine the entire way up. I was a little bit cold in my 40 some nights, but I was definitely too warm in my 20 most nights, which is why I kind of alternated back and forth between the two temperature ratings. So I think if you want to do some extra clothes, you want to bring some extra clothes with you and opt for a 30-degree quilt, I think you'll be perfectly fine, to be honest with you. I started with a Dyneema composite fabric, you know, DCF, lightweight food bag, and there was really nowhere to hang it in the desert, so I ended up sleeping with my food most of the time. I didn't want to leave it out for a bear to get it. I didn't camp in very, very highly populated or highly used tent sites along the way. I tried to stay, because I was alone, in those areas that weren't frequently used, you know, for bear reasons, for critter reasons. But when we got to Kennedy Meadows South, you're required to bring a, bear canister. Now, I have a Bear Vault BV, what is this, 450? It's the middle one. And I recommend that you just go with the standard size BV 500. This was not enough room for the Sierras. Reason being is my hiker hunger kicked in at about mile 680. So I had already had the food canister, and at Kennedy Meadows, I swapped to this at mile 700, and we tried to fit 7 days of food in here, and it just didn't happen. I could only get about 5 days of food in this canister, and that was really pushing it. That was very limiting on my calories, and I would not recommend that to anyone. Do yourself a favor. You have to carry this anyway. Just get the BV 500 or the Barricade, which is a little bit lighter, but a lot more expensive. on a side personal note, I hated carrying this thing. It's just a terrible thing to carry. I don't know what to tell you. What I would do if I had to do it again is I would repack my food every night and put the empty canister on the top of my backpack instead of having it right up against my back. Every time I slipped on ice or fell in the Sierra, I just felt like I needed a chiropractor at the end. Did not like carrying this at all, which is why at Kennedy Meadows North, we were past the bear can requirements except for Desolation Wilderness, and we got the almighty Ursack bear and critter model. If you're gonna spend the money on an Ursack, get the bear and critter model, because if you just get the bear model, critters can chew right through this thing, and if you just get the critter model, well, that's silly. What's the point of bringing a bear bag? This is made of Kevlar, and this was I don't want to say it was my favorite piece of gear, because I definitely hated this thing too because of how heavy it was, but it was better than the bear canister, and it handled exceptionally well. There's this giant rope that you can do a square knot on, or whatever knot it is. And honestly, I carried this from Kennedy Meadows North all the way to the Washington border, just because there's so many bear can or bear storage requirements. But after Desolation Wilderness, at least in 2024, you didn't need to carry a bear can. So we went from all the way from South Lake Tahoe past Desolation Wilderness with that bag. The restriction is no camping without a hard shell bear canister. But after that, Ursacks are actually on the National Park approved bear container list. So keep that in mind. We converted several other people while out on the trail from canisters to the Ursack. Up next is my backpack. Now, I think this would have actually been one of my favorite pieces of gear had it not been for a specific thing that I'm going to talk about. First, let me tell you how the bag performed by itself. Stitching held up great. Front pocket held up great. Got snagged on a whole bunch of things, but never ripped at all. I felt like I never needed more storage capacity than what this had to offer. This is a light AF, a curve, full suspension, 40-liter backpack. But I will say, with the bear canister on this, I do suggest you get a 46-liter if you're looking at this same model. Reason being is the 46-liter has the load lifters. Now, the only thing that I felt I needed load lifters for was when we carried 7 days of food and we had to carry some additional water. Like, I think 5-liter capacity was a little much for just these shoulder straps. If I had the load lifters on here, I think it would have been a billion times more comfortable. Now, it didn't hurt. It was just a little uncomfortable carrying that 5th liter of water, but it did work out. I have these little pockets up here, which I kept my phone, my headphones, possibly some snacks, and whatever other goofy things I could fit in here. Water bottle pockets were absolutely great. I carried my tripod back here. I carried water bottles, one on one side, 2 on the other side. Worked out great. I got this little bottom pocket, which I really didn't end up using for anything other than gloves and my micro spikes, which fit very well into here. What else? One thing that I was talking about, because this didn't make the favorite gear list, is I had a couple issues, not with the pack itself, like not with the stitching or anything or how it was put together, but the actual material on this. So this is an Ultra EPXL recycled fabric made out of, I think like 40% water bottles or something crazy. But I found that it abrased very easily. And for a thru hike, I don't think I would recommend this fabric. I would recommend going with something DCF or, perhaps something else. I think there's a new fabric coming out, maybe you want to look into. Now, with that being said, I did get a couple marks where I had to use some patches and seam tape. I didn't have any delamination inside the pack at all, which is great. It remained completely waterproof in the snow and the river crossings, but I have a patch here. I have a patch here down by the water bottle pocket, and I have a patch here on the other side by the water bottle pocket. Now, the 2 water bottle pockets weren't the fabric didn't pull apart, at least, but it was definitely abrased pretty hardcore. And I don't know what to say about this fabric. On one side, it was easy to fix. It was super easy to fix. I just carried a couple Ultra 200 patches, never had a problem. But I shouldn't be having to fix things like that. And it's not on Light AF for this one. It's actually on Challenge Sailcloth, who makes the fabric. And I talked about this a little bit on the PCT through hike. Get the pack, but get a different material, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Everything else on the pack handled great. And like I said, I think if I would have chose a different material, this would have been top 2 favorite pieces of gear. I started off with a pack liner, which I think everybody should have, especially in the Sierras with the water crossing. It's just, you don't want to risk losing your backpack. A lot of people had slipped in. A girl that we were hiking behind actually swept down, I think, 150 feet in one of the water crossings, and she was like pinned underneath of a log, and she had to be rescued. But all of her gear remained dry because she used a pack liner, which is great. So I started with a Nylaflume pack liner, but again, like I had on the AT where it kind of blew a seam, it did the same exact thing. I was done with them after that. I think Nylaflume bags are great for weekend trips, but they are absolutely not a smart decision for a through hike. Your mileage may vary, but that's 2 very bad catastrophic failures. So honestly, I just got a trash compactor bag, and one of these lasted from mile 700 or 800 all the way up to 2600. And that was just perfect for me. In the desert section, you may also want to carry a piece of 1/4 inch or maybe 1/8 inch foam. I saw a lot of people doing that just to stop any kind of like cactus needles, if you will, or thorns going into your sleeping pad, which is what I think happened to me. Big 3 really didn't change much for me. I was completely satisfied with my gear choices. Even the backpack, again, I would probably choose a different fabric if I had to do it again, and the 46 liter just to get the load lifters. But other than that, that's my big 3. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments section below, and I'm gonna get working on this electronics video. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Also, 2 more videos from now, I'll be doing a question and answer. If you have any questions for me, I already started the first session, but I have a lot of questions starting to pile up here. If you want to ask anything specific, let me know down in the comments below, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.